everyone. For a Filthy Lot Entertainment, welcome to Drawn and Cornered. It's the show that corners today's best comic book artists as they answer deep dive questions while they draw art suggested by you, the fans. After the show, you can bid on the art and all proceeds will go to our guest's charity of choice. So make sure to watch to the end to see the final product. Today in the drawing chair is Brenda Hickey. Brenda is a brilliant artist that has an unhealthy obsession with comics. Her passion for drawing is infectious, and there's an inherent joyfulness in her art. Her works include My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic for IDW, Ward's Valley from Top Shelf, and the self-published, creator-owned Halls of the Turnip King. Brenda, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me and asking me to be on the show with you.
That's my pleasure. Can you tell us what you'll be drawing today and what charity this will benefit?
I'm actually going to be drawing a picture for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So, yeah, and it'll be going towards Black Lives Matter. One of the Canadian chapters for sure, either Toronto or Vancouver. So sorry, I haven't figured that part out yet, but
Absolutely. We'll make sure that all that information is available for our viewers at the end of the show.
Yeah.
So first question, from Jeff Lemire to Joe Schuster to Chester Brown, Canadians have always thrived in comics. Being a fellow Canuck, why do you think this art form appeals to Canadians and also allows them to find success?
Ooh, that's one I've never thought of before. Maybe it appeals to us because it is a kind of a solitary thing. Like, you don't need much more than yourself, a pencil and a piece of paper to create a story of whatever catches your fancy. And being we've got long winter months of isolation, maybe it kind of draws us in that direction.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the long winter months of isolation. Got to keep us busy with some creative endeavors.
Yeah, or else we'll go mad.
And you've been into comics from a very young age. I mean, in fact, as a kid, you actually made up characters inspired by the sidekick animals in Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor.
Yeah.
Over the last several years, you've been working on comics based on your childhood characters. Can you talk about them and when we might see something published?
Yeah. I've always made stories. I grew up in a really big family. There's 8 kids. I'm number 4. And my sisters and I, the older 4 of us, we kind of banded together and we were best friends. And we always made stories together based on whatever was on TV mostly. At first, they were big chapter books. We had this big epic fairy chronicles story that had like all these different, we called them chapter books, but like illustrated novels we would do back then. But I wasn't so much of a writer. I didn't write a lot of them, but I'd draw my characters and stuff for it. And we didn't have a ton of comics in the house growing up, but we had Archie comics, at least. We had Archies and whatever you found in the newspaper. So I knew what comics were from that. You put a little dialogue balloon, like the process made sense. Mm-hmm. But yeah, something about seeing Sailor Moon on TV, and I wanted to create that, but I couldn't animate. There was no way a kid of my age, like in 5th grade, could do animation. So I was like, okay, the next best thing is comics. Like, that's the closest I can get with my resources. And I took to the comics a lot more than I took to the novels my sisters were writing. So yeah, it just exploded after that. I mean, my sisters also did their versions of their comics, but they were all kind of similar back then. Just kind of a girl goes to another world with a little animal sidekick and has to save this planet from destruction. So it was kind of the same plot, all of them. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about comics. I could escape into that, and being from a big family, you had to share everything. And that was the one thing I could have and indulge in and have it be my own. I didn't have to I shared it with my sister because we shared our stories, but it was still mine. So it was really nice for that. It was something you could share, but something that was yours.
And obviously you want to share these stories with the world, because you do. I mean, I assume you have an intention of publishing some of these characters' adventures in the near future.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, some of them just are dear to my heart for that. Like a lot of kids say they grew up with Spider-Man, Batman. I want to grow up to draw Spider-Man, Batman. And it's a strange thing to say that I grew up with my OCs, as they say, and I want to draw my OCs now as an adult, kind of as my interpretation of that. So yeah, I'd love to see them in the world and just live a life outside of what it meant to me in my childhood, and yeah, kind of pay a bit of an homage to that precious time in my life.
Well, we look forward to seeing it when it comes out. Now,
Thank you.
what were the books that were most formative for you as a child? You mentioned Archie there.
Yeah, we read a lot of Archies, and yeah, it's funny because we would model the art, like our characters. We looked to the Betty and Veronica fashion, so we could make up clothes and outfits and stuff. So that was kind of fun. And now that I'm an adult, I got to meet Dan Parent, and I told him what we did as kids, and we would look up the Betty and Veronica stuff, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I drew some of those stories you're talking about, where you got those ideas and those drawings." So it was actually really cool to kind of have it come around like that too.
So Brenda, you're not our first guest to say that they've been heavily influenced by Archie comics and being their first comic book. Is there something special about Archie that makes it their first comic? Is it the accessibility of it and just being able to pull it off of a supermarket shelf?
Yeah, the accessibility in my case helped because my parents, like my dad read comics growing up when he was little, but he wasn't somebody who carried that into adulthood. So he wouldn't take us to comic shops, for instance. But if we were at the grocery store and there was an Archie digest and we're like, oh, can we get that? It looks cool because I mean the drawings are appealing. So if a kid sees it and it's like, I want this book, and it's there, and the parents like, okay, cool. I used to read comics, and puts it in the cart. So we had a bit of a collection, and we always wanted the Betty and Veronica ones, which was also a good point with Archie, was that there were stories not just about Archie, but Jughead and Betty and Veronica. So it's like if you've got little girls and they want stories about girls, then that's an option. And so that helped put that in our house, is that it was there, because yeah, wouldn't have we wouldn't have gone to a comic shop when we were little.
I guess
But
the popularity of Archie really, the way I look at it, I guess you're right about the accessibility of it all, and why it's so predominant in a lot of
mm-hmm.
people's collections is because I guess you could pick up an Archie comic literally anywhere, at a grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
at a gas station,
Yeah.
at a shop, at a bookshop,
Mm-hmm.
at a pharmacy.
Yes. Yeah, Troy said when he was growing up there was spinner racks, and that was gone by the time I was a kid. There's a bit of an age gap between Troy and I, so his comic experience growing up is quite different than mine. But something about Archie stuck around in public, like more public places like that. I feel like that's a big thing that kids comics could really benefit from, is that if they were more accessible, that a parent wouldn't necessarily have to seek out the
Mhm.
comic book shop in particular, but they could go, like if you had a parent who wasn't into comics, they could find the comic there. But if a parent that wasn't, they found My Little Pony, and the kid's like, I want this pony book. So I mean, they have them at Chapters Indigo and your bookstores, but Archie was there. You could see the cover. It wasn't just a spine on a shelf of other spines. Like, and the spinner racks were the same. You saw the covers, and you saw instantly you were appealed to this. You were attracted to this art. So yeah, I think the accessibility really helps, and I think a lot of other comics could really look at that example too. I know there's still issues, like it's more complicated than just put them out there, but I think it would be a good thing to consider.
Yeah, their distribution model was quite smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whether it's My Little Pony or Ward's Valley or working on animated shows, you seem to be drawn to creating content geared towards younger audiences. What is it specifically about children's stories that attracts you?
I like the energy of children's stories. I really like the element of fun they have. Sometimes I feel like, some adult media is kind of lacking in the fun aspect of it. And that's really what draws me to love a character, is when you feel like you're having fun with them, and it feels like it's not just work, it's a little bit of play, and you learn something along the way about, you know, just the small things in life. It doesn't have to be this huge, or even, yeah, taking a big issue and kind of making it more digestible for somebody who's new to that. I kind of like that challenge, as well as to just kind of use children's media that way.
Right.
So,
Do
yeah.
do you have an itch to do a more adult oriented story at any point? And you know, or do you ever feel sort of held back knowing that you have to keep things, you know, PG?
I don't feel held back by it, but I don't have any urges yet to do more adult content. Like Turnip King has some naughtiness in it. I will say it's more teen, and I don't know if I could go. I don't know if I could go older than that, just where I'm at currently. But that's not to say that someday I might not have an idea that calls for those things, and then I would, of course, let people know accordingly. Like, if you like my children's stuff, maybe be careful of these things, because, you know, there's an assumption there that one person likes to stick to a certain genre. But as it is now, I don't have anything that calls for a more adult approach, so I might as well just stick to that kind of young adult feel and vibe.
You've never really been into mainstream comics, but you do have a love for manga, indie comics, and also a love of Japanese culture. What are some
Yeah.
specific influences that these have on your work?
Well, I definitely went for a Gretzko, because, like, my most recent project with Oni, because that Japanese, so like, it's a Japanese product. So I'm like, oh, I want that one. But My Little Pony also attracted me because it looks very much like that style that I like, with the big eyes, very colorful and the magical and friendship based. So that's what attracted me to that. So yeah, it definitely really shapes what I go for in comics when it comes to the projects I seek out. But yeah, it can be a little bit strange to be this person in comics who's like, I never really read Batman or Spider-Man, and I'm not chasing a superhero to write and draw. I'm kind of a strange one in that way.
Oh, that's right. There's plenty of other artists out there that have no interest in mainstream characters. They just want to create their own worlds that they can live in and share with everyone.
Yeah, and that's what I like about manga, is that, like, the guy who does One Piece, like, nobody else is gonna go and take One Piece and do their version of those characters. It's just kind of him and his staff and his editor, and that's their thing. And the next person that comes along will do their thing, even if it's heavily inspired by it. Still something new. So that's kind of where I took my influences.
All right, you started your career in web comics. It's not an uncommon way for artists to find their feet these days. What was it like to work that way for so many years, and how did you make the transition to traditional publishing?
I found web comics for me was kind of lonely in a way. Like, I felt like what I expected it to be like and what the reality was for me was quite different. I know a lot of people are like, you post online and you get instant feedback, but I don't know. I felt like maybe I came in when there was a lot of web comics around. Maybe there was a bit of a saturation, but I was also behind a paywall on this website called Wirepop. So there was also a bit of a barrier between me and my readers. So I just did that because I followed the example of another creator who used that website to get started. So I thought, oh, that's a good way to kind of make a few dollars while I'm doing this book. But I think I should have just made it free, and then I would have seen a bit of a difference. But I don't know. I couldn't keep a schedule. I worked too slow, so I couldn't keep up a weekly schedule on top of having a day job, because I was working at an animation studio back then, and so my production wasn't always consistent on it. So I just did everything wrong in webcomics, and I felt a little bit like, this isn't working. I don't feel like I'm connecting to an audience, and maybe I'm just old fashioned and I have to stick to print. So yeah, I decided to take it to print and to see what was available in comics that suited me, because I knew that I couldn't draw Transformers or Spider-Man or something and do it justice, because my heart wasn't quite there like other people's would be. yeah, and that's when My Little Pony was coming around, and I thought, if there's going to be any comic I can do, it's this one, so I might as well take a shot at it. I didn't even think of how popular it was. That was a kind of a whirlwind in and of itself, but I just kind of went for it because it felt like the right fit for me. So luckily, the editor thought I was the right fit for it too, and he gave me the job. So great.
The rest is Now, you've drawn your own stories and other writers' scripts. How do those two modes of creating change your artistic approach and process?
Well, when I'm drawing for somebody else, I tend to stick pretty close to what they give me. I don't like to stray too far if I can help it. But my own stuff, I'm kind of all over. Like, I can have a script and I'm like, I don't feel like drawing this anymore. Like, or I feel like it would be better if I took a page to do this instead of a couple panels, and I just kind of feel it out a little more. It's more intuitive. Mm-hmm. Whereas, yeah, working with a writer can be, you just follow a map and you just kind of go. You have to figure it out. Of course, there's that, but you don't get to have as much play with the visuals and the medium. So it's good, because working with a writer did kind of help me rein in some of my more, like, kind of give more structure to my intuitive approach. And I was like, yes, it's valuable to learn from other people and how they structure their stories. But I do like having that flexibility of being able to follow the feel of the story as well, instead of just kind of be limited. But both are good challenges, I think. And very valuable lessons to learn, because you've got to know how to work within limitations as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Pegamoose Press is the banner under which you and your husband, Troy Little, release your own comics. Both of you have done plenty of work for some of the biggest publishers in the industry. Mm-hmm. So what went into the decision to start your own small press publisher?
Just that desire to want to tell our own stories. We have many of our own stories that have always been on the back burner, and we just never can make time for them because paying the bills comes first. And so we thought, well, why don't we start investing in ourselves and saving some money from our paychecks so that we can kind of pay ourselves back and buy ourselves some time to do those books that we always wanted to see exist in the world. So we made the decision to finally do that, and Turnip King was a bigger success than I thought. I'm always worried. So I'm like, it's going to fail, no one's going to want it. But it ended up being a success. So I'm trying to think of that moving forward. Don't panic. It's okay. Don't panic.
And just to pivot here a little bit, I'm going to ask you a different question here. What is the all-time best children's animated series and why?
Oh, man. I have to say Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's so good. It, like I said, with children's media, it does a really good job of taking big ideas and big issues in the world and breaking it down in digestible ways for younger audiences, that even if you come to it when you're older, you can relive those lessons and be like, yeah, this is something I need to hear even as an adult, and really need to contemplate. Like they just did such a good job on that, and it was so much fun too. So it's not like being lectured at. You get these lessons in this world, and you have fun in it, and you learn something along the way about humanity and compassion and all sorts of different issues in the world.
Your Majesty, these juveniles were arrested for vandalism, traveling under false pretenses, and malicious destruction of cabbages.
Off with their heads! One for each head of cabbage!
Silence!
So I really think it's well done children's show. I'm really glad that there's a resurgence of interest now that it's on American Netflix and everybody's going on. I'm like, I need to rewatch it again too. Because there's just always something you can get from a rewatch.
So. Oh, absolutely. So many fans of that show as well. It's got such a massive audience over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you talked about how you started working in My Little Pony comics. Was that always a dream gig for you?
Actually, My Little Pony wasn't a thing for me when I was a kid. Speaking of having a big family and having things that are your own, I had one sister who was very adamant that things be her own, and My Little Pony was that thing she didn't want to share. So, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to even play with my own. She wanted her collection and she didn't want anybody else to have their own collection. She was a little controlling about it, but that was my reality. So I kind of just wiped it out of my mind that would ever be my thing. But yeah, the things come around, have a way of coming around, and ponies found me, whether yeah.
So you basically took the My Little Pony job to make your sister jealous?
No. It wasn't like that. It's kind of this little haha thing, but it's nothing like that. It's I took it because I really connected with the redesign, but sure. The irony is this, but no, the reality was that I took to it because of the style and the art and the vibe of it too. Because again, it was a fun show. It had its morals and lessons without feeling like it was badgering you about it, and yeah, just really well written, well produced, and well acted. And
now, I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask you this, but everyone knows about the stereotypes surrounding Brony culture. Now, how true are those whispers, and what's the weirdest encounter you've had with one?
I have a way of avoiding the weirdest side of things. I think it's because I do have a nature of keeping to myself, and I'm like, there's some things I don't need to know, so I just kind of move along. Right. So I think I've avoided some of the weirdest of the stuff. But I think the thing, like any fandom, the thing that's hard with bronies is that people tend to look at the dark side more than they see the good side. And it's like, we all know fandoms have their creeps and their weird fetishes and obsessions. But when you go to the pony cons and you see like the joy that everybody's just sharing amongst themselves, and they're doing a lot of good charity work for good organizations and just celebrating the messages of the show and just so joyous, I'm like, whew, that's not something to knock, something that brings so much positivity to so many people. And if it makes you do good things, then, like charity work, or like you connect with a group of people and you make friends, then I think that's positive all the way around. But I mean, you have weird interactions with fans at any convention, not brony specific, so I can't say anything weirder than what I've experienced at a normal con would happen in my world anyway. My avoiding, like I just kind of do my thing and move along kind of lifestyle. But I know some of the other people have seen some other things, some of the other artists, they're like, oh yeah, I've seen some things. I'm like, yeah, I don't need to see those things. So, and I just do my thing, and yeah.
Well, keeping it positive is always a good thing. It's something that we could use a little bit more of, especially in today's day and age. Now, I emailed you a picture that I took off of your Twitter account. It's time for that part where we look back into your Twitter and pull up something that you probably don't remember ever tweeting. What can you tell us about this photo?
That photo was, there's not really a lot to tell. I'm the worst at Halloween. I never know what to dress up as. So I never have a costume. And I had bits of costume, and I'm like, well, I guess I could be, like, I got a pink wig and I got some stuff that looks like schoolgirl clothes, so why not just be an anime schoolgirl? That was it. Troy had his horse head on in the background, as you can see. He loves that thing.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned you're drawing some Zelda stuff for us. Yes. And I can see on your phone there that you have a Zelda icon on your phone. So you're obviously a fan of Zelda.
Just a bit, just a little bit. Not obsessed. Let's not go that far. No,
what is the best Zelda game that Nintendo ever put out?
Oh man, I love them all for such different reasons. I think the first one I really fell in love with was, and this is one people don't like, so this is a controversial opinion, but the one I really fell in love with was Skyward Sword, because I love the story and I love the music. I get that the game mechanics are clunky for the Wii, and it wasn't always the easiest to play, and there's some repetition issues. You have to fight the same boss quite a few times, but I loved the soundtrack, and I loved the different, because usually Link and Zelda don't really have much of a connection outside. They just kind of meet one day and their fates intertwine, but they grew up together in this game, and I think the character Groose is hilarious. I don't know why.
Well, sorry, pal. Groose doesn't do charity for wimps.
He just cracks me up every time that he's just such a stupid brute, but then he actually becomes a good character as the game goes on. Like, I like seeing his growth, which, yeah, again, is not something I think you see. Well, I mean, Midna changes in Twilight Princess. She's kind of a brat, but she gets to really trust Link. But
Sure.
I don't know. I think it was the first time that really resonated with me, like the characters. Like, I've always loved Hyrule and Zelda and the world that you escape into, but there was just something special for me about Skyward Sword. I don't know what it was. I've since replayed Twilight Princess, and like I'll play them a few times over, and I glean a lot out of them as I replay them again too. Like, the pandemic had me playing a lot of Zelda.
For me, it was always Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker. I remember when Wind Waker first came out, I spent an entire summer just playing that game over and over, even after I had finished it, because it was just so rich and incredible.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Yeah, I think I missed that. Like, I did play a bit of Ocarina of Time when it first came out, but I think I was 5th grade when it came out, so it was a little bit too hard for me back then. And I watched my siblings play it a lot. But yeah, and then I skipped Wind Waker. I think the first one I played was Twilight Princess on my own. And from there, I kind of got more into the franchise because I was finally, like, I was in college at the time, and I was like, I get this now. Like, I'm ready for the challenge, which I know is not really like epic gamer attitude or anything, because people would be doing these things when they're like so young, and I'm just like, I'm in college, I'm finally ready for Zelda. But I don't know, I just like the mythology in the world, and every game just has a different charm to it, and there's always like these just really strange, lovable characters all over the land. Like, I don't know, just so much fun, so much imagination in them.
So Brenda, your husband Troy is also in the comic book industry. How did you guys meet and become a couple?
Well, it actually started when we were both working at this little animation studio in Charlottetown. It was called Trapeze Animation. We were doing this CBC show called Raspberry Jazzberry Jam, and we were in the layouts department. And yeah, we just got chatting because obviously we liked comics in common. It took a while though, because I'm very shy and quiet, and I thought Troy didn't like me. He didn't talk to me very much, but he later revealed he was shy to talk to me. He's like, I could talk to everyone else, but I thought you were too cute. I'm just nervous and run away. So it took us a while before we actually really started talking. But yeah, it just kind of, we hit it off right away with the talking comics, and our headspace for comics was in a very similar place, that we kind of liked the indie stuff. We liked, you know, some of the less mainstream, I guess. And when it came to the comics we wanted to make, it was kind of the same too. We liked telling our own stories, and we liked kind of these smaller little self-contained creator-owned things. And that's kind of what we wanted to emulate with our work. So it just, and he was just so nice, like, and open to things. Like, when I was young, I would be self-conscious talking to comics people that I liked manga, because they're like, oh, manga, and they give the eye roll. So I was a little self-conscious, but he was cool with that. He's like, I like mangas too. I like Akira. I like these things. So it's like, okay, you're not gonna just like, oh, you like those ones attitude, because you know how in any nerd fandom, there's always this hierarchy of nerddom. I felt like, oh, I'm on the low rung with my manga love. But yeah, Troy was good with that, and the stuff that he introduced me to was quite interesting. And yeah, we just had so much in common. What's that?
You just clicked.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, just clicked so well, just made sense.
It seems there's been a huge increase in demand for young adult graphic novels since Raina Tegmeyer released Smile back in 2010. I'm wondering just how big an impact you feel that had on the industry and spotlighting the importance of comics for kids.
Well, I feel like more publishers are open to graphic novels now. The industry of comics still is a little bit, like, it still has a bit of a hard time, I find, with knowing how to sell all ages stuff. I mean, maybe it's gotten better and I haven't been paying attention, but I mean, I know the ponies sold really well, but they would try other lines of things like, for Marvel and DC, all ages stuff, and it just wouldn't quite work. I don't know. I have a hard time because I don't pay a huge amount of attention to the comings and goings of the industry per se in that way. But I do like that more publishers like are propping up that are willing to publish it and put it through the book market rather than the comics industry. There's a lot more of that opening up, and people wanting to sell to libraries and schools is a big push because there's a lot of potential there.
It sounds like being a comic artist has always been a goal of yours from a very young age. Now that you are one, what was something that you didn't expect as part of this job?
The conventions were a surprise. I never thought making comics would be a way I could travel. I had no idea with that. I just made comics because I loved making comics. It was a strange thing that I didn't think of what all that entailed in some weird way. It's like, I know I want to make comics, and that's all I know moving forward. So yeah, the conventions being a thing was something I had no idea about. And when I found out about them, I had no idea you could be guested at these things, especially comic artists. Like you hear the voice actors or like the Hollywood actors and stuff, and that makes like that's all you hear about in the cosplay. At least that's the things that filtered through first for me with conventions was that. And then suddenly it's like, oh, and the comic artists get to go too. And it's like, that's really cool. You get to meet the people that made the books you love, like Dan Parent and all these things. But then all of a sudden they're asking you to come and be a guest. And you're like, it almost feels surreal, like me, I'm nobody. Why are you asking me? So it's a really big surprise that, because I never expected it and I never anticipated it. It was just, I'm happy. I'm really thankful and grateful people would even consider me. I don't have a huge long background in it. I just managed to get on something popular like My Little Pony. But I guess I still kind of struggle with that. But am I allowed to be here? And maybe it was a lot to happen early on in my career that the imposter syndrome kind of sunk in a little bit. So I'm a little like, oh, are you sure this is okay? Nobody will figure me out. So, but yeah, I am really grateful for that, despite everything. Like, I know I don't have like a lot of years behind me, but people would request that I show up at these shows, and it's just it always blows me away that, I had requests from Poland, requests from Germany. Like, I've been to Europe because of this, and I never thought that would be something in my world. So
are there any conventions that you're itching to get to that you haven't been to yet? Are there any on the bucket list kind of thing?
I'd like to check out Thought Bubble in England. I've heard a lot of good things. I like the small press shows, like the ones that could focus more on the indie stuff. So, whereas I've been to San Diego Comic-Con once, and I liked it for the social aspect of it, like meeting my editors in person and meeting everybody. Like, everybody's there, but I'm also, again, a shy person, and being in a big crowd like that is a bit intimidating for me.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine tabling. I was only there as a guest, and well, not a guest, but like I just did a couple signings with IDW. I was there as a attendee. There we go. That's the word. And yeah, I enjoyed the social aspect of it, but I don't know how I could table that.
Yeah, it's such an overwhelming convention. I went to it in 2012, and just as a fan, walking around for the 4 or 5 days, it was too much. I can't imagine what that's like, having a table there for that entire time, and the stream of people. There's a convention in Japan called Comic-Cat. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Okay. No.
Have you? It's one of the biggest ones out there. Their yearly attendance is about 750,000 people.
Oh yeah. That's so many people.
Yeah, that's what you know. I'm sure, and they cover a wide gamut of sort of fandom. You know, going all the way from manga to mainstream superheroes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure one day you'll probably get to that one.
Yeah, it would be good to do it once. Like San Diego, I'm glad I did it once. Like I didn't table, so not to say I did it per se in that way that other comic artists do it, but I'm glad I experienced it even as a fan, and I would like to go back someday. But again, that social aspect is more my motivation than sales or tabling or anything. I just would like to go. I'd like to see the show for as long as I could handle, and then go out to the beach or something, enjoy San Diego, the city, and then meet my friends after hours. So, yeah, that's kind of my style. I'm like, if I think I go back, that's how I want to work it.
Earlier, you said that you have been working on a book with your husband Troy. What's that been like in collaborating for the? Is that the first time?
Yeah, it's our first collaboration, which you kind of think, well, why did it take this long? But here we are. It's better late than never. Yeah, it's been good. It's a very different approach that we've gone to for this. Like we hear a lot about people working out stories with those little note cards. So we thought that would be a good way, and then we can kind of mold it as it needed to. We could write down story points and fit it in the puzzle where it needs to go. And so it's just kind of nice talking about it. And car rides to visit Troy's mom, for instance, we could fill up the time just talking about, oh, what if this happened? What if that happened? Kind of prepare for those sessions where we would write them down on the cards. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was just really fun. It was like having a creative conversation. Like you're chatting, but you're also building something with this conversation. And you know, we would bring such different sensibilities to the book. To like, he would say something, and then I'd be like, well, what if you thought of it like this, or what if we added this? And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. And what if we took this idea and made it like that? And so it really kind of pushed our own limitations that way, and pushed it a little further to see a different way we could do it and make it cool. And
so no arguments.
No. I think we're pretty flexible humans that we're open to suggestions, and we kind of look at stories of like it's a process, and the more back and forth, and if you have anything to add, it's not taking away from somebody, but it's building towards the finished product to be stronger. So you just kind of have creative ping pong back and forth and have some fun and see where it goes. It was pretty fun, and I hope we can find a way to do another collaboration after this that works. Because our approach is a little bit unique that we're doing for the book. That it's half drawn by Troy, half drawn by me, and half written by each of us. So it's not like one of us did writing, one of us is doing art. So it's a very organic, very collaborative process. I hope people like what we're doing. We think it's kind of a unique little book that we're putting together. So we're really hoping that we can reveal what it's all about, that people will be like, oh, that's a cool way to do something like that. So
yeah, that's interesting. Half drawn, half written by each creator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did that pose some unique challenges, or did it feel like, I mean, you mentioned that obviously it worked out. Was it natural? Did it feel natural working that way, or?
For the story, yes. Because we're telling the story we're telling, because it's a bit of a ghost story, we were able to work in these different elements. It's kind of surrealism. We were very inspired by artists we met when we were in Europe, like Tony Sindova, who's like this really brilliant, like he does this really brilliant surreal stuff with his artwork and with his storytelling, and we just like that dreamlike quality. So we were kind of approaching it with that. I mean, it won't end up looking anything like Tony's stuff, but it'll still be what it is. But to kind of approach it with a bit more of a surreal, or, you know, really leaning on the ghost story aspect of it, and time and memory. so that it makes sense that there'd be different styles interwoven in it. So yeah, we were just having some good fun with some different approaches.
Oh, that's cool. It's nice to mix it up too and just find different ways of creating cool content.
Yeah, because one of Troy and I can often complain that we feel kind of stuck in our own ways with comics sometimes. So to do something a bit more with an experimental approach, we're like, we hope that we can break some of our usual ways, like our crutches that we tend to lean on, and see if we can like open up and be a bit more artistic and creative on the page rather than kind of this rigid way we work that we've developed now, that we're like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could just like do something a little bit wilder or out there than kind of this really controlled, you've seen our line work. It's very controlled and very clean. Like, wouldn't it be nice to kind of like shake us out of our habits a bit and really push ourselves artistically? So
does that mean working with different mediums as well?
Yeah, we usually use brush like what I'm using here, and we're gonna do more like pen and dip ink and stuff like that, and texture watercolor paper to really give it organic look.
Now, finally, I have one last question for you. What can we expect from Brenda Hickey in the future?
Well, I'm working on, Troy and I are doing our first collaboration comic, and we're hoping to get it out maybe early next year. It's a little short story. We haven't released too much of it yet, but we'll be talking more about it in the future, upcoming months. We'll be doing that, and my next Pegamoose book doesn't have a title yet, but it's it'll be about my old character that I had, Ari, my little mascot character, like the old animes kind of stuff. It's kind of a take on magical girls and their little characters, and because Ari is a big personality, so she's not really the type to be relegated to support characters. So there's the conflict is kind of with her wanting to be more equal, I suppose, in the partnership than just like this kind of little support thing that eats cake while the other one does all the fighting and the work and stuff. She's like, I want to be out there on fighting. So it's kind of more about that struggle there, a bit of a power struggle in those kind of relationships. So
excellent. I'm sure fans are going to be looking forward to seeing those finally come out.
yeah, I hope people like it when it comes out. I hope it makes an entertaining story.
Brenda, it seems that our time has come to an end. Now is the time to reveal what you've been drawing this whole time. All
right, so here we go. Some Link attacking some bokoblins. Oh man, I say I'm a Zelda fan. I can't pronounce the words. Oh no, fake geek.
That's all right. That looks amazing.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
Well, if you want to own this awesome piece of art, check out the auction link below and make sure to bid. All the proceeds from the sale of this piece will go to benefit Black Lives Matter. Brenda, thank you so much for being cornered with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, thank you guys for watching Drawn and Cornered. Now remember to bid. Make sure to subscribe and click that little bell icon to get notified for future episodes. Thank you, everybody.
See ya.